Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm Avinash Upadhyay. I'm a senior product manager in AWS Backup team. And I will talk about our recent launch, AWS Backup support for Amazon S3. And I'm also joined by my colleague, Priyesh Bansal, who is also a senior product manager in AWS Backup team. So here is the agenda for our today's talk. We will start by providing an overview of AWS Backup and its value to our customers. We have been innovating new features in AWS Backup continuously since our launch in January 2019. And after introducing AWS Backup, we'll move to our current launch, which is AWS Backup for S3 preview. We'll also do a demo of the launch and show how the launch works. And then I'll hand it over to Priyesh, who will talk about some of the other notable launches we had in AWS Backup in 2021. And then we'll open up the floor for questions and answers. So let's get started. Before I provide an overview of AWS Backup, let me give an overview of what we heard from our customers when we launched the product. In today's time, our customers use multiple services across compute, storage, database to build and manage their applications. And customers also need data protection for all these services that they're using. Our customers told us that they want simplified management of data protection policies. Customers also want to prove compliance of their data protection policies. They need to make sure that all their backups and protected data is compliant, and they need to generate reports to demonstrate compliance. And customers told us that they want a simplified experience that will enable them to prove compliance of their backups and data protection policies without creating additional tools. And thirdly, customers want cost optimization. Like customers want to reduce cost by minimizing time and effort of protecting application data. They want automated tools which will help them to minimize their cost of data protection. Keeping in mind all this customer feedback, we decided to launch AWS Backup in January 2019. AWS Backup is a centralized, policy-driven service that centrally automates your data protection across multiple services. Like you can use a single central policy in AWS Backup to automate the backups of compute, storage, database services that you are using. And this is what we provide, automated data protection management. In addition to creating backups, we also help customers improve their data resiliency and continuity by enabling them to recover or restore from their backups with a few simple clicks in the AWS Backup Management Console. Our restore experience is very simplified. And finally, we help the customers to ensure that they're meeting their compliance and data governance needs. So these are the benefits with which we provide to customers through AWS Backup. We have been innovating in AWS Backup at a very high pace since our launch. Our innovations have been focused around 4 pillars. Our first pillar of innovation is to support different AWS services. As of today, these are the different AWS services that we support through AWS Backup. You can create backup, centrally create backups of the following AWS services using AWS Backup. And our recent addition, as you see, is S3, about which we will talk in details today. Our second pillar of innovation has been around improving the compliance and governance for our customers. These are some of the innovations that we have done in that aspect. The major highlight of the being Backup Audit Manager and Backup Vault Lock, about which Priyesh will talk today after me. Our third pillar of innovation is improving the customer experience by enhancing our platform. And our fourth pillar of innovation has been focused around backups outside AWS. Yesterday, we announced our VMware backup, which will allow customers to create backups of VMware workloads that are running on-prem or in the cloud. So these are some of the innovations that we have been doing in AWS Backup, and Priyesh will go deeper in some of the innovations when he talks. Now that you have seen the pace of innovation in AWS Backup, let's talk about our highlight today. OK, let me do a quick show of hands here. How many of you are familiar with AWS Backup? How many of you have used AWS Backup? OK, great, almost everyone. So if you are familiar with AWS Backup, or if you have used AWS Backup, then you might be using other AWS services also. You'll be using compute services. You might be using block storage, file storage, and you might be using different database services. If you are using any of the services that you see on the screen, you can centrally back up all the services using AWS Backup. Customers wanted object storage to be included in this centralized backup and restore experience. And Amazon S3 is the object storage service in AWS. So customers told us that they want to centrally create backups of their application data that is stored in S3 and other AWS services. And customers also highlighted the importance of point-in-time restore for S3. They wanted the ability to restore their S3 buckets to a point in time in the past. Listening to the voice of customers, we announced our launch for this reInvent, AWS Backup for Amazon S3. Right now, it's in preview mode. This launch has the following benefits. It will allow you to centrally back up your application data that is stored in Amazon S3 and other AWS services. Like, you can create a single central data protection policy in AWS Backup to automate backups of your application data that is using S3 alone or using S3 along with other compute, storage, and database services. The second benefit is the capability of restore. You can use AWS Backup to restore your S3 buckets or objects to a point in time in the past. And the third capability is that it simplifies your compliance monitoring experience. Just like AWS Backup simplifies compliance monitoring for other AWS services, it will be simplifying compliance monitoring for S3 Backup also. Now, one of the very common questions that I get from customers is, when should they use AWS Backup for S3? And when should they use the industry-leading capabilities that are already provided by S3? Now, AWS Backup for S3 and the existing capabilities that are provided by S3, they complement each other. Some of our major customers have told us they are planning to use both the set of capabilities simultaneously. If you are a backup administrator who needs to centrally manage backups of your application data across multiple services, then you can use AWS Backup for S3. If you are a storage administrator or an application developer who needs to preserve storage data or prevent unintended deletes in your storage data, then you can use the different capabilities that are provided by S3. And as I already said, like, these two set of features, they complement each other. So you can use both of them simultaneously. Let us now look at how AWS Backup for S3 works. It works exactly how AWS Backup works for other services. We have kept the customer experience consistent. You create a backup policy in AWS Backup. You assign your S3 buckets to that backup policy. You assign your other AWS resources to that backup policy. And AWS Backup will automatically create backups of all your resources. All the backups will be stored in an encrypted backup vault. And you can specify the backup vault in the backup policy, and you can also specify parameters like your frequency of backups, retention period of backups, et cetera, in the backup policy. And whenever you want, you can restore the backups from your backup vault with a few simple clicks in the console. There are a few other features. Firstly, we create backups of your S3 bucket, including your object data, your tags, your access control lists, and your user-defined metadata. Also, please note that the first backup is a full backup, and the subsequent backups are incremental backups at object level. So what does this mean? This means that when you take the first backup, your entire S3 bucket is backed up. But then, say you added one new object to the S3 bucket. The next time, we'll back up only that new object. So this is how we will be creating your backups. Now that we saw how your backups are created, let's see how we protect your backup with different layers of security. We have built a lot of capabilities in AWS Backup, and we also use some of the capabilities that are available in AWS to create multiple layers of security and protect your backup data. Here are some of the best practices we recommend. You can use IAM policies to restrict user access. You can decide who should see get access to your backups and who should not get access to your backups. You can enable multi-factor authentication to make sure that no unintended party is getting access to your backups. Thirdly, you can enable AWS Backup Vault Lock to make your backups immutable. In that manner, no unintended party can come and delete your backups or change your backup retention period or your backup transitions, etc. AWS Backup Vault Lock also prevents malicious actors from coming and re-encrypting your backup data. Talking about encryption, you can encrypt your backup vault with an Amazon-provided key management service key or with your own customer-managed encryption key. So that is another layer of security that you can add using the different options you have. And finally, you can enable Backup Audit Manager to generate reports and monitor your backups and make sure that you are compliant with all the data protection regulations that your organization needs to be compliant with. OK, we saw how we create backups. We saw how we store and protect your backups. Let's now talk about restore. Using AWS Backup, you can restore your S3 buckets. You can restore individual folders that are there in the S3 bucket. And you can also restore individual objects from the S3 bucket. The restore experience is very flexible. You can restore your S3 buckets or objects or folders to the source S3 bucket from which you created the backup. You can also restore them to another S3 bucket, another existing S3 bucket, or you can choose to create a new S3 bucket during restore. And also, you can change the encryption of your restored buckets or objects during the restore process. So there are a lot of parameters that you can customize during restore. And you also have the option to not customize any parameter and restore it with a single click too. And thirdly, just like we do for backup, we not only restore your S3 buckets or object, we also restore your tags, your access control list, and your user-defined metadata. So yeah, these are some of the features that we have in our launch. Now, you might be wondering how to get started. It's a very simple process to get started. You need to define a backup policy in AWS Backup. In the backup policy, you specify like what is the frequency of backup, what is the retention period of the backup, and you can also specify a few other things like you can, at what is the window at which you want the backup to start. So these are some of the parameters that you can specify in the backup policy. I'll show it in the demo. And if you already have a backup policy in place, if you are an existing AWS backup user, you might be already having a backup policy, and you decide that you want to use the same backup policy for S3 also. Then you can skip step 1, and you can directly go to step 2. You can assign your S3 buckets to your backup policy using tags or resource IDs. We also have a drop-down feature in the AWS Backup Console, which will basically list down all the S3 buckets that you have. And then once you assign the backup policies, once you assign the S3 buckets to your backup policy, you are all set. AWS Backup will automatically start creating your backups. And then you can manage and monitor your backups using the different dashboards that we have in AWS Backup, or you can also use the controls that are available in Backup Audit Manager. Now I'll provide a demo of how this feature works, and I'll switch to my laptop, and I'll walk you through the AWS console. So I'm logging into my AWS account. So this is my AWS Management Console. If you are using AWS Backup for the first time, then you need to click on Services, and you need to scroll down to Storage. And this is where you will find AWS Backup. Again, if you are planning to use S3 Backup for the first time, there is a one-time setting that you need to enable. You click on Settings in the left pane, and here you will see the list of resources that are already that AWS Backup supports. You need to click on Configure Resources, and you need to click this toggle button to turn it on. It's already turned on in my account because I have been using it to create S3 backups. And we also recommend versioning as a best practice in AWS. Like if you are using S3 bucket, we recommend you to turn on S3 versioning. So we have kept S3 versioning as a prerequisite to create backups. And once I click on the toggle button, and I can select Confirm, and I have enabled S3 in my AWS Backup environment, and I can create backups now. I can use an existing backup plan, or I can create a new backup plan. So I already have a few backup plans in place. If you select backup plan, you can see some of the backup plans that I have, which I use to create backups. I'll assign Amazon S3 to one of my existing backup plans. But at the same time, let me walk you through a backup plan and what are the parameters that you will see if you have to create a new backup plan. So to create a new backup plan, I select on Create Backup Plan. So there are different ways in which you can create backup plan. There are 3 options. Your first option is to use a template that we already provide in AWS Backup. Your second option is to define a backup plan using a JSON expression. And your third option is to build a backup plan using the console. I'll build a backup plan using the console. You can provide a name to the backup plan based on your organizational best practices, whatever names you use in your organization. You provide a name to the rule. And then you can select the backup vault in which you want your backups to be stored. So every AWS account has a default backup vault in every region. But if you want, you can create new backup vaults. You see, I have 3 backup vaults in my account right now. And if you want, you can just click here and create more backup vaults. I'll use the default backup vault. And then you can specify the frequencies, like what is the frequency at which you want the backups to be created. These are some of the options we provide. You can also enable continuous backup, which help you to restore your backups to any point in time in the past 35 days. So the periodic backups that you create, you can retain them for as long as you want. You can retain them even for an infinite period of time, while the continuous backups are retained for a 35-day period. And then you can customize your backup window. You can decide when do you want the backup to start. The default starting time is 5 a.m. universal time, but you can customize and you can select some other time. And you can also specify the retention period for your periodic backups, like how long do you want the backups to be retained. You can select the number of days, or you can select the number of years for retention, or you can just choose to retain them forever. So these are some of the options you have in a backup plan. Yeah, I'm not going to create a backup plan here because I already have a backup plan. I'll use this backup plan, and I'll assign my S3 buckets to this backup plan. So to assign my S3 buckets, I need to click on my backup plan, and I need to click on Assign Resources. And then this window will open up. You need to give a name. And you can also specify the IAM role you want to use. And we provide different options for you to assign resources. The first option will assign all your resources to that backup plan. The second option will allow you to select individual resources. Here, I want to show it for S3, so I'll select only S3. And then I'll use this drop down, and I'll select S3 here. And then this drop-down will show me the S3 buckets that I have in my account. So yeah, let me select this S3 bucket. If you want, you can select more than one S3 bucket from the drop-down. One question that we often get from our customers is, what if they have hundreds or thousands of S3 buckets? How do they assign hundreds or thousands of S3 buckets to the backup plan? You can use tags for that. You can tag your S3 buckets using a key value pair, and you can use the same tag in your backup plan. And AWS Backup will find the S3 buckets that have the matching tags, and those S3 buckets will be assigned to the backup plan. So there are different options for you to assign your S3 buckets to the backup plan. And then I'll click on Assign Resources, and I'll click on Continue. And I'm all set. Based on the frequency that I have assigned, AWS Backup will start creating my backups for S3. Once your backups start getting created, there are different ways in which you can monitor the backups. You can go to our dashboard. You will see the number of backups that have been created in the last 24 hours, the number of restores that have happened in the last 24 hours. You see, I successfully created 111 backups in the last 24 hours. And 9 of my backups failed. And you can also enable SNS, Simple Notification Service Notification, or CloudWatch events, so that you can get a notification every time there is a backup failure. And you can also go to Protected Resources. It will show you what are the different AWS resources you are backing up. Like you see, I'm backing up a few EC2 instances, a few EBS volumes, one Aurora database, one document DB cluster, and 2 S3 buckets right now. These are the source resources that I'm backing up. And then you can go to Jobs. Here you can see the status of all your backup jobs. Every time a new backup is created, it will get updated here. And whenever the backup is complete, you will see the checkbox here as complete. And similarly here, you can see your restore jobs. And for services which allow cross-region copy, you can even see track your copy jobs here. So these are some of the ways in which you can monitor the progress of your backup. And all your backups are stored in this backup vault. So you see I have 3 backup vault. My default backup vault has 53 backups, and my other backup vault has 54 backups, and my third backup vault does not have any backup right now. So I'm using default to backup my S3 buckets. So when you click on your default backup vault, you see the list of backups that are stored in this backup vault. And if you scroll on the side, you can see the resources from which these backups were created. Like I have few EC2 backups, few EFS backups, few S3 backups. Now, I'll show how to restore a backup. So to do that, you go to your backup vault, you find out the backup which you want to restore. I'll restore this S3 backup that is here. I'll click on the checkbox. I'll click on actions, and I'll click on restore, and I'm all ready to restore. If I want, I can restore it straight away, or I can customize some of my parameters. As I said, I can restore my entire S3 bucket, or if I want, I can restore individual objects within the S3 bucket. To restore individual objects, you need to know the URI of that object. Here, I'll select restore entire bucket. You also have the option to restore it to a source bucket, or restore it to another existing bucket, or create a new bucket for restore. You also have the option to change your encryption key during restore. You have the option to change your IAM role during restore. I'll keep these rules as it is, and I'll click on restore backup, and I'm done. The blue bar is showing you that your restore is in progress. And after some time, once your restore is complete, you will see your restore job is complete. Now I'm seeing my restore job is pending. After some time, it will be complete. So this is how AWS backup for S3 works. Now let me switch back to my slides. Yeah, can you switch back to the slides? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, also another point, using AWS backup, you can create backups of your S3 data that is stored in different storage classes. You can use AWS backup to create backup of data that is stored in S3 standard, which is the general purpose storage class used for frequently accessed data. You can use AWS backup to create backups of data that is stored in S3 standard infrequently accessed, S3 one zone, S3 one zone infrequently accessed. These are the storage classes that are used for like less frequently accessed data. And you can also use AWS backup to create backups of data that is stored in the new S3 storage class that was announced yesterday, S3 Glacier Instant Retrieval. So these are some of the storage classes from which you can create backup to our backup vault. Yeah, now the big question, how do you get access to the preview? It's a simple one-step process to get access to the preview. Please send us an email to this email ID, s3backuppreview@amazon.com. Mention your account ID, and also mention your customer name. And there are no additional charges that AWS Backup will charge for using the preview. And also, please note that the preview is available in US West Oregon region, or PDX region of AWS. So thank you very much for attending my session. I'll be looking forward to having you as enrolled in my preview, and I will also be looking forward to your feedback during the preview period. Now I'll hand it over to Priyesh, who will talk about some of the other notable launches of AWS Backup in 2021. Thank you.
Thanks, Avinash. So our customers love the centralized and automated data protection experience that AWS Backup provides across various AWS services, and we continue to add more services to our portfolio. Recently, we launched AWS backup support for Amazon Neptune and DocumentDB. So now you can use a single data protection policies to protect your AWS graph and document databases across with other services that your application might be using. So like Avinash shared, in S3, you can use either an existing backup plan, or you can choose to create a new backup plan to define your data protection requirements, and then assign your Amazon Neptune and DocumentDB databases to it. Once you create a backup plan, AWS Backup automatically start creating backups as per your defined policies and store them securely in your backup vault. You can also choose to create additional copies of your backups in a different AWS account or region for compliance and business requirements. Using a single click, you can choose to restore your application data from these backups and maintain business continuity. You can also audit and monitor the compliance of your data protection policies using Backup Audit Manager, which I'm cover in a bit. Now, in addition to adding support for more AWS services, we also continue to enhance support of our existing services based on the feedback and use cases that we hear from customers like you. For example, our customers shared that they would like to take backups of all the EBS snapshots attached to an EC2 instance at the exact same moment to maintain their application state. To meet this requirement, we added support for multi-volume application consistent snapshots. Now, AWS Backup can take snapshots of all of your EBS volumes that are attached to a single instance at the exact same moment, which helps you maintain your application state in your backups. Now, these backups retain data of all the input-output operations that are completed across your EBS volumes. It simplifies your experience as you do not have to stop your EC2 instances or manually coordinate among various EBS volumes. Similarly, you can launch an EC2 instance from these backups, and you will get the exact application state prior to taking backup. Another example of an enhancement to an existing service is our launch that added cross-account, cross-region copies, cold storage, as well as cost allocation tags to DynamoDB. Now, you can meet your compliance requirements of having separate independent copies in a different AWS account and region, or manage your cost better by transitioning your DynamoDB backups to a cold storage, and track your bill by using cost allocation tag for DynamoDB. Now, we all know that backups are critical for business continuity and disaster recovery. However, just taking backups is not sufficient. Our customers tell us that they want to make sure that their data protection policies are aligned with their business practices as well as regulatory requirements. For example, let's say that you have a recovery point objective of 24 hours. Now, to meet that RPO of 24 hours, you want to make sure that you're taking your backups at least daily. Additionally, if you're operating in a regulatory industry, you might be subject to additional requirements. For example, let's say that you're processing any payments data, then you might be required to follow the PCI DSS standard. Similarly, if you are in healthcare sector, you might be required to follow the HIPAA standard and show evidence of compliance during auditing. Now, auditing could be internal or external and is usually focused on two broad areas. First, what data you are protecting, and second, how you are protecting it. And your auditors might ask you questions like how frequently you are taking your backups, how long are you retaining, or whether you are encrypting your backups or not. Just to ask a question like how many of you have these sort of audit requirements today? Okay, nice to see some hands. And how many of you have automated the process of auditing and reporting? I don't see any hand here. Yeah, so this is the feature for you, basically. So we launched AWS Backup Audit Manager, which is a new feature in AWS Backup that helps you continuously track your backup activity and automatically audit it to meet your regulatory and business requirements. There are three key benefits of Backup Audit Manager. First, resource tracking. So AWS Backup Audit Manager continuously tracks any configuration changes, meaning any create, update, or delete operation that you perform on your backup resources, such as a backup plan or a backup vault, gets automatically tracked, and a change history of up to 7 years is maintained natively within the product. Now, the next time when your auditors ask you that, hey, tell me how your backup processes have evolved, you can just export this change history and show it to your auditors. Second is auditing. Backup Audit Manager provides you pre-built customizable controls that you can use to define your backup requirements, such as how frequently you want to take your backups or what's your backup coverage like. Are you taking backup of all the required resources or not? And notifies you when you are in non-compliance so that you can take remediation actions. Third is reporting. So once you have created your controls, you can use out-of-the-box templates provided by AWS Backup Audit Manager to create periodic and on-demand reports that contain data related to your backup jobs, copy jobs, restore jobs, or the compliance status of the data protection policies that you have. During your next audit cycle, you can share these reports with your auditors and simplify your process. Backup Audit Manager works consistently across all the AWS services that we support. I would recommend you to go and check out our product documentation to learn more about the feature. Looks like some update is happening. Okay. Now, we all know that backups are often called as last line of defense against malicious actions or accidental actions as well. And you want to make sure that your backups are appropriately protected. We launched AWS Backup Vault Log, which is a new capability that helps you create immutable backups and protect your backups against any inadvertent or malicious threats. So once you create and enable a vault log, it works on the write once, read many model, also known as worm. So once a vault log is enabled, even your most privileged IAM principal, such as the administrator of a root account, cannot delete your backups or modify its lifecycle policies, such as transition period to cold storage. Again, with the increasing number of threats that we are seeing, it's a really important feature to lock down your backups and secure them. You can use AWS Backup Vault Log to protect backups of all the services that AWS Backup supports today. So these are some of the notable launches that we had in 2021. I hope that you are as excited about them as we are. To wrap up the session, here are some of the key takeaways. So you can use AWS Backup to protect your backups across multiple AWS services, including Amazon S3 now. You can use a single data protection policies that works consistently across all the supported resources. And you can use features such as Backup Audit Manager and Backup Vault Log to manage governance and compliance of your data protection policies. As next steps, I would encourage you to go out and check our product documentation and other training material that we have available. If you want access to Amazon Backup for S3 preview, please send us an email at the mentioned address. And if you have any questions or feedback, please reach out to us at any of the channels listed here. Thank you. Now I would like to invite Avinash on stage for the Q&A. So any questions anyone have?
Yeah. We don't have it in the current feature because the preview is only in US West region, but we'll consider adding it in our future launches when we do in our future launches, yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you everyone. Thanks for joining.
Assuming no other questions. So thank you, everyone.